Welcome back to another episode of the Travels with Kev podcast, a podcast which helps you navigate America's passenger railway and beyond. I'm Kev, I'm your guide, and a fellow traveler. And today we're diving into the art of choosing the perfect Amtrak destination for you and the best time for you to embark on your adventure. Whether you're a seasoned rail enthusiast or just starting to explore the world of train travel, this episode may have some tips and tricks to help you navigate your perfect trip. And before we go any further, I just want to say thank you to the Travels with Kev patrons. They are an awesome group of people. You can join them. Go to Patreon/Travels with Kev, all one word, and you can join Barbara, Peter, Brian, Amy, and Steve. They are great people. We have some Discord every once in a while, not Discord, but we have some conversations every once in a while. I give them a little more insight into what's going on. They get the news first. And you have the option, if you support for $5 or more, you can get a postcard that I create sent to your house. If you're interested, awesome. If you're not, hey, let's learn about some train travel. For many people, traveling by train is magical. I know it is for me. And as you glide along the tracks, you experience the beauty of North America's landscapes in ways impossible from 300,000 feet in the air, or those glances you can sneak as you're driving along trying to avoid Winnebagos and semis as you travel along the highways and byways. From the majestic mountains of the west to the rolling hills of the northeast and the sweeping plains of the Midwest, every Amtrak and via train routes, the Canada Amtrak, offers a unique perspective on these diverse countries. But choosing the perfect destination isn't always about the scenery. It's about what you want from your trip. What are you looking for? Are you looking for a day trip, a relaxing getaway, an adventure-filled excursion, or a combination of them all? Your travel goals will play a big part on determining where you should go, when you should go, and if the train is the right way for you to get there. I'm often asked, when is the best time to travel? Most people aren't happy with what I say. My usual answer is, well, when you have the time and money to do so. Well, that's not the answer many people expect or want to hear. There's a grain of truth. There is not one time that is the perfect time to travel for everyone. Because everybody's different and has different needs. Ultimately, you need to answer that question for yourself. And that's my goal with this podcast, and there is a corresponding webpage for it, which is in the show notes, is to help you answer that question. When is the best time to travel? Some people might say the best time to travel to New Orleans is during Mardi Gras, while other people might not want to deal with the crowds and want to go in the fall. So it's all on your perspective on what you want to get out of the trip. Before we start planning your next Amtrak or VIA journey, let's take a minute to think about what you want to get out of your trip, right? Do you want to unwind and take a leisurely sightseeing tour? Or maybe you're looking for something more action-packed. Maybe you're interested in exploring a new city, visiting friends or family, or even going on a historical or cultural tour. Understanding your goals helps you narrow down your destination options. For example, if relaxation is your priority, why not just consider taking a train trip? Routes like the Coast Starlight offer stunning views of the Pacific Ocean and the Cascade Mountains. On the other hand, if you're looking for some adventure, you could take the Empire Builder, and it takes you through the rugged terrains of the northern United States with opportunities to explore national parks like Glacier or Yellowstone. Or maybe you simply just want a day trip somewhere down the tracks. Grab lunch and come back. For years, that's what I used to do. And for those years, the best time for me to travel was Tuesdays. Why? Because it was my day off. And I went it's late on Wednesday. So with that schedule, I could easily take a day trip. And if I got in a little later, got a little tired, I could sleep in the next day. But that's what you have to find for yourself. When is the best time for you to travel? Once you define your travel goals of kind of what you're looking for and when you have time off, and don't forget to use that PTO and vacation time. Don't let that go to waste. Let's look for potential destinations. Now, within the Amtrak network, it covers over 500 destinations across 46 states, so there's no shortage of options depending on what you want to get out of the route, how much time you have. But obviously, at least I hope it's obvious, that doesn't mean that all the destinations will work for you. Start looking at the different routes available from where you can start, where you're at, and see the cities that they serve. Then consider what each destination offers regarding attractions, activities, and accommodations that interest you. For instance, if you're a history buff, you might be drawn to cities like Boston or Washington, D.C., where you can explore some rich history of the United States. If you're more into the arts, you might like cities like Chicago or New York. Maybe those are more up your alley with world-class museums, theaters, and galleries. But it's also worth considering lesser-known destinations that offer a unique experience. For example, smaller cities like Santa Fe or Charleston have much to offer in terms of cultural and charm without the hustle and bustle of the larger cities. Or even niche down further. One of the best perks of train travel, and this is something I used to take advantage of, is I got to check out some small towns within the Midwest that were along the rails, like Galesburg. There used to be a coffee shop I loved to go to, or Normal, Illinois, where I could feel the vibe of a small college town. What kind of city do you want to go to? Or do you want to avoid the cities and find a quaint downtown to enjoy some of your time? Or do you want to find a quaint downtown of a small community to spend your time? If you're looking for a day trip, and that's actually, I'll be honest with you, that's how this whole article and podcast started, was talking about day trips, and it kind of got out of hand. But if you are looking for a day trip, and that's something I used to love to do, here's how I used to pick where I would go. So I live in southeast Wisconsin, and I'm fortunate enough I can catch an early morning metro train to Chicago. From there, I can travel all around the Midwest. I've taken day trips to St. Louis. I've mentioned Galesburg, Battle Creek, Ann Arbor, and others. The train ride is essential for me on these trips. That is why I take them. I wanted to take the train somewhere, but not all the destinations along those routes were good for me, because I needed something to do on my layover before I head back, like get coffee, lunch, walk around, stretch my legs, and just enjoy not being at work. But depending where you live, you may have fewer options of what Amtrak routes you can take for day trips and the destinations that you have to explore. Some routes allow for limited day trips, while others require an overnight stay to head where you want. So just keep that in mind. This is how I check to see if my travel idea works as a day trip or if I have to take a day or two. I begin by examining the schedules. I take a look at where I want to start and determine how far I can travel along a route while still being able to return. And I want to give myself at least a 2-hour layover. Now, if you've traveled the rails a little bit, you know some routes are a little different, like the Hiawatha. That allows for shorter routes because the train that takes me to Milwaukee, for example, is the same train set that will take me south to Chicago. So I know that if it's a 45-minute layover, if everything goes well, I can get off the train, grab a cup of coffee from Stone Creek or one of the other local coffee places right in the immediate area, and then head south. I kind of like doing that. It's kind of for fun. It's fun for me. But you have to know the train routes really well before you can know how to take advantage of that. That is the advanced course. You can easily access schedules by downloading or printing them from the Amtrak website. If you don't know how to do that, I have articles on how to do that. You can just start looking at the app. If you're sitting and watching TV, put in a place where you want to start and where you want to finish. You can always check the schedule pages on this little website called travelswithkev.com. If you have not been there, go visit. It's always changing. But like I said, one thing that also works is you can just try booking round trips and see if Amtrak will let you do it. If they'll let you do it, it should be a valid route. So, what am I looking for on those routes? So what I do is I look at the furthest destination that I can go, see if there's anything there. That's where tips like Google Maps work really well, or any of the map apps that allow you to examine what's around the train station. So I go see how far out I can go, have a 2-hour layover, and return. And then I start working backwards. I start looking at the intermediate stops. Is there an intermediate stop that excites me more than the furthest out that I can go? If I take an intermediate stop, I will have more time there. So, for example, if I wanted to take the Lincoln service, I could take that all the way down to St. Louis. Or I could take it to Springfield and have time to look at some of the museums and activities there. So that's just few of the things that I do to see what stops work for me, and so see which interests you. It's a good idea to take notes on each stop that you look at, because that way then if you want to do that again, you already have those notes. It can save you time later. And as I mentioned before, explore the area around the station. While some stations are in bustling areas, for example, Galesburg is just right downtown, others are more remote. We talked about Charleston, South Carolina before. That station is not downtown. It's actually in North Charleston. But research the nearby amenities. Look for dining spots that you might find exciting. Shopping, local attractions, or whatever else you are into to ensure that you have something to do that suits your needs. A community you're interested may not work well for a day trip, but keep it in mind if you just want to get a weekend getaway or spend a little more time away. Use up that PTO, like I said. Use your resources. Sometimes it pays to talk to other travelers to get inspiration or ideas. Check in with local Chamber of Commerce or community websites can help to see if there's any activities coming up that sound fun for you. You can check out YouTube to see if someone else has been there. If you like roadside attractions, amusement parks, or oddities, see if Jacob the Carpetbagger has been there, and he can give you some ideas. I love his channel. Podcasts are helpful too. I've been listening to Beyond Bourbon Street by Mark Bologna, which gives you an insider view of New Orleans, which someone may specialize, have a podcast specializing in the area you want to see. And it's great to get that inside information. I want to warn you about something, and this is based on my experience. And this is more talking to other travelers. Some people may want to pressure you to travel according to their preferences or want to take control of your trip. They might insist that you must visit certain places or vehemently discourage you from visiting places that you're interested in. Once somebody told me, although not necessarily directly, that I was stupid for not wanting to stay at a particular hotel in San Francisco. Now, I checked out said hotel, and if I followed their advice, and I did stay there, I mean, I could. That was in my budget, but I would have to shorten my trip and stay in the room the whole time because that's all I could afford for that trip. Instead, I stayed at a hostel and had a great time because it fit my budget and thus freed up travel dollars to experience other things. Remember, it is your trip, so keep it that way. If you make a mistake, it becomes a learning experience. It can become an excellent story later if something doesn't go as planned. Take a chance, make a mistake, but learn from them. With each new trip, you can do better. It is one of those, my little pet peeves of when people try to take over your trip, and it's always by very well-intentioned people, but it does happen, and I want your trip to be your trip. Before I leave this section, there is something I always make sure I do. Now, take this with a grain of salt or however you want to take this little tidbit. I'm not telling you must do that. I'm not taking over your trip. But I always try to leave something for the next time. What do I mean? I've been to San Francisco several times, and everybody asks, have you been to Alcatraz? It's something I do want to do, but it's something I always leave for the next time because it is something I'm interested in. It is something I want to do, but if I never do it, I'm okay. My life will still be full. But it gives me, if I'm looking for something to do, I'm like, oh yeah, I've wanted to see Alcatraz. I want to go back to San Francisco. It allows me to keep my wanderlust alive. It allows me to keep those dreams alive. It allows me to keep wanting to travel. So if you can, just leave something for next time. But make sure it's not something that you will regret, okay? So we talked about destinations and seeing how far you can go and come back within the time allotted. And then consider how much time you have on the ground. But let's talk about timing your trip, right? Because not every time is the right time. Once again, answering when is the best time to travel for you. So here's what you should consider, right? The time of year you choose to travel can significantly impact your experience. Consider the weather, local events, and the tourist season of the destination you're planning to visit. For example, if you're heading to popular destinations, like I've said before, like New Orleans, you might want to avoid Mardi Gras or Jazz Fest season if you don't want to deal with the crowds, unless you want to go to Mardi Gras or Jazz Fest. In that case, that is the time of season you want to go. But if you're just for wanting to have a beverage and stroll around Bourbon Street, or as Mark suggests, go beyond Bourbon Street to one of the garden tours or the drink and learn tours, you might want to consider what some travelers call the sweet spot, usually called the shoulder season, right? It's that time of year just before or just after the peak tourist season, when the weather's often still pleasant, but the crowds have either yet to begin or have already thinned out. Often the seasonal places are still open during the shoulder season, but always double check. So that's something to consider because sometimes it's a little bit cheaper. Sometimes you get to get into some of those touristy things without waiting in as long of a line. And some areas just don't really have those. Some of the bigger cities, unless there's a big convention. I remember being in San Francisco. I found out 2 conventions were going on at the same time, and I never was affected by them. Although I used to go in March, and I always, never planned it, but I always ended up with a St. Patrick's Day parade interrupting my trip. First time I got annoyed because I was on the wrong side of the street and had to wait an hour and a half for the parade to go by, but kind of learned to embrace the fun. Another thing to consider is the climate. If you're planning a trip, these days, most search engines give you the average weather conditions during a given month, so you know what to expect. If you don't like the cold and snow, don't go to the north in the winter. And if you don't like the heat, New Orleans in August is not the time for you, or Florida for most of the year, depending on how much heat and humidity you like. But those are some of the things to take in consideration. If you're only taking one trip a year, do it during a time that you're going to enjoy the season. Personally, I would not go to Colorado in the winter. I don't ski, and I have snow at home. But seeing Colorado in the fall, when the leaves are turning, on the California Zephyr, or in the spring, when everything's coming in bloom, those are the times I like to see. Now let's talk about accommodations. Now, it's kind of the evil part of travel. They're not always fun. It's often the second most expensive part of your trip, finding a place to stay, unless you're staying with family or friends. But let's take a look at a few things. Now, time of year can play an important role, and often, too, using a search engine to find out. I'm going to keep using New Orleans for an example, because it's on my mind. Wow, that should be a song. Anyway, sorry. ADD, getting distracted. You can type in what is the average hotel rate for New Orleans or insert whatever city you're going to for September or October or whatever month you're looking at. And so you'll have an idea. You can play around. So you might find that if you're not really interested in any of the touristy things, that going in a total off season of New Orleans and, maybe the fall or winter, if the weather fits you, you might find that the accommodation price fits you, and there you go. You have a perfect time for you to go. Just find some things to do first. Well, there's always something to do in New Orleans. Beignets. I mean, if you're into hurricanes, I've never had one, but the drink, not the weather. I've been in hurricane weathers, but there's always something to do in a lot of communities if you take the time to look. So if you're traveling on a budget, consider booking an accommodation well in advance to take advantage of the early bird discounts. Alternatively, look at unique lodging options like bed and breakfast, hotels, and vacation rentals, which can offer a more personalized experience than traditional hotels. For those who are looking to stay in luxury, consider a luxury hotel or resort where you can indulge in spa treatments, fine dining, or other amenities. The other thing to look at, too, is hostels. And that's one thing in the United States and Canada, I've stayed in hostels, and they're not always what you think. A lot of hostels offer, I stayed in one in Toronto in the spring of 2024 and had a great time. I was in my own little capsule, and I had a lot of privacy. I've also stayed in hostels in Philadelphia and San Francisco where I had my own room. So there are options for them. And also, too, they're not just for young people, but it's a great way, especially if you're a traveler. I love them because the atmosphere is better. And if you like to cook, often there's, kitchens that you can use, places for you to store food, and it's a way that you can save some money. But no matter your budget, often there are plenty of options to choose from. The bigger the city, often the more options you have. So you can find the perfect place to rest your head after a long day of exploring. While this podcast is about Amtrak, I try to sneak via in a little bit. And these tips aren't exclusive to just the U.S. rail system. Many of the same principles apply if you're considering a trip on Canada's Via Rail, or even road tripping, or I've kind of applied these or used them to look at trips for even flying. A lot of things with travel are not just one mode of transportation exclusive. Whether you're looking to traverse the stunning landscapes of the Canadian Rockies or explore the vibrant cities of Quebec and Toronto, defining your travel goals, researching your destinations, and timing your trip is vital to the success of your journey. Similarly, if you're exploring in other modes of travel, like bus, car, even flying, these tips, like I said, are still helpful. The most important thing is to plan a trip that aligns with your interest, your budget, and your preferred travel style. Choosing the perfect destination for any Amtrak journey is all about understanding what you want from your trip and doing research to find the place that best matches your interest. Whether you're seeking relaxation, adventure, a little bit of both, there is an Amtrak or a Via route that might be right for you. Before I wrap up, I want to remind you to subscribe to my email list. You can go to travelswithkev.com/email. I put out a weekly email, usually it's weekly. I'm trying really hard to do weekly. Plus, and in that, I'll have sometimes travel news or travel tips. You can find out a little bit about what I did during the week if you're interested in that. If not, you can skip that section. But it's just a little way that we can continue this conversation beyond the podcast. If you enjoy this information and want to support my work, please consider joining Patreon, like I said in the beginning. For just $5 or more, I'll send you a postcard I create and mail it to your home as a thank you. There are other ways. If you are interested in supporting, if not, that's fine. That's fine. But if you are, I can go to travelswithkev.com /support to find out different ways. And, just by sharing this podcast with somebody who you love, who's interested in train travel, or someone you tolerate, or even somebody you don't like. Could be a good torture for someone. The more you share and the more we can get the word out, that helps me too. And it takes very little effort. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Travels with Kev. These tips, I hope, can help you plan your next adventure. Until next time, keep exploring, keep discovering, and keep traveling. So safe travels and happy planning. And we'll have my niece Mackenzie take us out. See you in the next one.
Thank you for listening to the Travel with Kev podcast.